the TEFL Commute, Season 5, Episode 6, Alcohol, in which we talk about alcohol and teaching. Right, here we go. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, Shaun. Welcome back.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. It's the last episode of the season. How do you feel?
Oh, well, I feel like we should have a party. I guess that's why we're talking about alcohol in this episode, is it?
It is indeed. Welcome, everybody, listeners. This is the TEFL Commute podcast for language teachers. That's not about language teaching, although the topic will come up from time to time. And we're on our 5th season. This is episode 6. Each episode we choose we choose an alcohol. We choose a topic and discuss it in depth. This is not one of those podcasts where we're talking about things drunk. But this time we are talking about alcohol.
Although now you're giving us an idea for season 6. Each week we do need to we record later in the day so we can have an alcohol of choice.
Yes. Well, indeed. I mean, let's alcohol. We've been wanting to do an episode on this for a while, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think both of us were talking before about how we believe that alcohol occupies a special place in English language teaching, notable for its absence in our teaching and materials. Often, we'd like to talk a little bit about that. Although perhaps not so notable for its very presence in after teaching. I don't know how much we're going to talk about that. I think we wanted to talk more about.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting that it's not. in both our contexts of teachers that have been pretty much expat teachers, I think in the life of an expat, alcohol or the situations of alcohol play an important part, as a social gathering place. But it's funny that it just doesn't appear in teaching whatsoever. And yet, as hopefully we'll discuss later in the podcast episode, it's one of those areas in English where there are it's so rich in language to talk about, isn't it? So,
well, let's start with that on like what is it taught, and if it isn't, why not? And I think I would argue that over the past 10 years, I've hardly seen any material or stuff which includes explicit focus on alcohol. And I'd even venture to say that prior to that, it may have been present, but it wasn't explicitly focused on. There was never like Unit 3 alcohol.
No, that's true. I guess if we go back a couple of episodes to when we were talking with Ben about film, I think one of the things that we were talking about there is in that 1970s I forgot the name of it now, the video series, some of those were kind of alcohol related in terms of how to ask for a drink or social situations. But no, there's no, you'd never find it in a modern course, would you? There'll be every editor's nightmare. Can you imagine? I mean, as many editors as I do, how they would balk at the suggestion of it.
It is very interesting to think that it used to be quite prevalent in for example, where dialogues were situated. Yes. Lots of dialogues would be at the pub, where your functional language would be. In the past, it would have always been maybe something ordering a drink, or someone would say, can I get you a glass of wine, or would you like another beer, or something like that. All of that has now been replaced by, would you like another cup of tea, or can I get you a soft drink, or no thanks, I don't want any more cola. In fact, because we don't even say Coca-Cola because of trademark stuff now in materials.
I know that in this area of the parsnip topic, which we'll get into, but actually, does what you're saying actually suggest what's happened? I mean, if you look at, I'll take British life. Is it the fact that it is the fact now that you probably go to a pub and you might not have an alcoholic drink, or you might have a coffee? There's been this big societal change, really, I think, since when I was first going to pubs and drinking, you went out to drink, but now you go out and people have soft drinks, and there's much more awareness about soft drinks. There's much more awareness about, we've become a cafe society, really, as well, which we weren't certainly then. So I wonder if part of that is a change in kind of, in British culture, for want of a better.
Yeah, and I think it could be partly that. I don't live in Britain, so every time I go to Britain, I still see a lot of people in pubs, but I've also noticed way more cafes. I think it's a change maybe in British culture, but probably more a reflection of world culture and trying to accommodate cultures where alcohol is just a no-no. So this becomes part of the parsnips acronym, which has been much discussed. Let's just do a quick gloss on what parsnips is.
Oh, dude, have we learned this since I think we brought it up earlier in the season, and neither of us could remember it. But,
it's politics, alcohol, religion, sex, narcotics, isms, and pork.
Well done. There you go.
Are those things that are not allowed in published materials. Sometimes, for cultural reasons, cultural sensitivities, and for other reasons. It's not just a cultural and religious thing, though, I think. It is.
So I'm going to ask you, I'm just going to take this a different way. I mean, you a couple of years ago, you published a book that was kind of went outside the norms of typical coursebook topics to try and debate stuff. Is that something? Is alcohol a topic?
You know what? It wasn't so much. In fact, the book that you're talking about, I think, is the one 52, A Year of Subversive Activity. And my co-author and I, Luke Meddings, we thought about including all of the parsnip stuff, but the lessons about sex or about alcohol, trying to craft them deliberately became, there was a fine line that I found myself walking on, whether or not it became too much of a jokey thing, and asking myself seriously, how much would I teach all of this in a class?
It's interesting that you said it's a jokey thing there. I mean, because I would say, as you know, I taught for many years in the Czech Republic, where alcohol is a very important part of Czech life. I mean, beer especially. And the alcohol lesson, while not being in published material, I would say many teachers had their own lesson that they brought out towards the end, just before Christmas or the end of the semester, which was on alcohol. Because normally we take the students to the pub because we taught adults.
Okay, well, that's true. I think there are different ways of approaching it. When I said jokey, I was sort of thinking of all the and we'll get to this at the end of the episode, all the slang words for wasted and smashed and hungover, which then can kind of veer into sort of, what you'd say in British, laddish, talking about or sort of glorifying drinking or sort of making kind of humorous jokes. Whereas teaching just the words for wine, beer, spirits, cocktail, etc., wasn't edgy enough, in fact, for that book.
No,
so that was sort of just straightforward, standard stuff.
So are we actually answering the reason why, apart from it being a parsnip, are we actually giving lots of reasons why it isn't a coursebook topic? Because it's just not worth it. Is that?
I think it's a shame that in materials that there aren't any dialogues where anyone gets any alcoholic drink at all. But I can perhaps understand why. But I think that's a bit of a shame. I think it's also a shame that when you that we don't include those words at all in the word lists for lists of drinks. Although in some books you may find them. That being said, I know that many people are thinking, okay, so what is this just for cultures that don't drink alcohol? Sort of in Gulf countries, the Middle East, Muslim cultures. I want to share a little anecdote of I wrote an activity for a magazine once where in the listening, this was around 15 years ago, in the listening, two people are showing another two people around their new flat. So they're saying, this is the living room, and someone says, oh, what a beautiful view. And then they say, oh, and here are the bedrooms, and look, there's a bathroom next to the bedroom, and kind of basic stuff. And then at the end of the listening, one of the people say, well, what a lovely apartment. And the owner say, it is. Thank you very much. Let's celebrate. Come through to the kitchen. There's a bottle of champagne in the fridge. Right. So it was a lot of there is, there are. And that was the end of the dialogue. Well, when when that went to the market where it was supposed to be sold, we got, the distributor got complaints from a school. Someone wrote a long letter saying, I am never using any of this published material in my classrooms or indeed in my institution again. I'm writing a letter to the authorities and so on. And what country was this? This was the United States of America. So this had happened in a country because they wrote this whole letter saying how we were encouraging young people to drink and how like it was illegal and terrible and so on and so forth. So, it was a curious, and that the reference had only been that these adults were going to have a glass of champagne to celebrate a new apartment. So it was interesting. So obviously it can, rub a lot of people up the wrong way. So, which is probably why publishers avoid it.
Oh, certainly. No, it doesn't. And it's a whole. I mean, it is. I think in this opening part, we've laid out lots of reasons why it may be avoided or not. But yeah, I think you just don't know who it might upset and not upset. I mean,
the plus side, you're right. In many cultures, alcohol plays a very important part, and not just talking about all the words for different levels of drunk or sobriety or whatever, or just the vocabulary for the kinds of drinks, but also I would assume there's probably useful language to be mined on sort of like things like this, cultural things like this is my round, or please let me get this one, or can I get you a drink, or what are you having, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, but it goes back to the functions again, doesn't it? I mean, the whole. It always seems to me that missing that language out. If you were equipping students to go to, and I know this model is a bit dated, there's a lot of discussion, but they're going to go to a country and speak in English, well, whether it's Britain or whether, they need to know the language of how to operate within an environment that wowould sell alcohol, like the rounds and stuff like that. And I think that if we don't cover that to a certain extent, we're doing a disservice to students. And I certainly think, a lot of my students, when I taught a lot of, in inverted commas, business English, it's that kind of scenario that they need to know because that's where they're going to function. So it is.
And I would imagine also, I mean, I've been in business situations as a traveling teacher trainer or author where that cultural information about whether or not to drink was very important. Sort of like, like they want me to have another drink. I don't want to have a drink, but is it rude for me to turn down the drink here? Well, or if no one is suggesting we have a beer and it's a certain time of day,
should I have a beer?
Like, is it too early? You don't want to seem like the alcoholic, whatever, when everyone kind of goes and it's like 5:30 and they're like, well, what are you going to have to drink? And you're thinking, I don't know. I'll have what everyone else is having because you don't dare ask.
The problem when many years ago, the Czech Republic, the attitudes have changed now, but many years ago, the Czech Republic used to pretend up for your 7:30 a.m. Business English class in company, and it was a 1-to-1 lesson, and the director was like, let's just start with a Bekarovka, which is a Czech spirit, So you need to learn the language of it's a bit early, or this idea of it. So it goes both ways on that one. I mean, the poor teacher having to, well, not having to, but the dilemma of it's the big company director. Should I have a drink with him or should I not? But
definitely,
this is a very serious. It's a very serious last episode, isn't it?
Then allow me to lighten up the mood a little bit, because we've been talking about alcohol in the sense of like teaching learners whether or not to teach and the advantages or disadvantages of teaching alcohol words. What about the effect of alcohol has on someone's fluency? Here's a question, Shaun. Do you think alcohol makes you speak a foreign language better or worse?
Oh, I'd certainly say my own. I always feel that I'm more confident, and so that I'm much more fluent after I've had a few drinks. But yourself?
Well, let's take a break. I'm going to share with you some stuff that I found on this. Let's talk about it just after our break here.
Drinking rum and Coca-Cola, go down Point Kumana, both mother and daughter, working for the Yankee dollar. this man and feed it. Since the Yankee come to Trinidad.
Producer James here with a quick message to say thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to show your support for the show, then you can help us in just a minute and it won't cost you a thing. Not everyone is as tech savvy as you, so if you know someone who would enjoy the show, get hold of their phone, open up the podcast app and show them how to find the podcast. You can even hit the subscribe button for them. With your help, we can reach even more teachers. Okay, on with the show.
Okay, Shaun, we're back again. Are you ready to know if I think alcohol makes me fluent or not?
Yes, I'd like to know. Yeah.
Well, I think it does a little bit. Certainly, as you said, it's the confidence level. But this, in fact, we're kind of talking about ourselves, but this has been studied. It was studied by someone called Guiora, Guiora, in 1972 and in 1980. And it's the most fascinating studies that I've heard. Just to give you a little bit of a taste here, I'll tell you what it was. They were in the 70s and 80s. At the University of Michigan, there were studies made on the effect of inhibition-reducing substances on pronunciation performance. So here we're talking more about pronunciation than we're talking about foreign language, but it was pronouncing a foreign language. In fact, they were Americans learning to pronounce Thai stuff. But the inhibition-reducing substances were alcohol and Valium. Can you imagine being part of these tests?
What I actually like about with the test is because obviously, I mean, to be fair, this is, I mean, you have talked about this since we've ever started doing this podcast to me about it. And
for this podcast, so listeners, what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to track down one of the 87 University of Michigan students in 1972 who took part in this test. If anyone's listening knows one of those people who took part in Guiora's alcohol and Valium test on whether or not it affected your pronunciation.
I'll let you go back to the test in a moment. What I do like about the research, I just like the idea that it was a double blind, so you didn't actually know which one you were taking.
I know. Well, hold on. Let me tell you. I found the paper that he wrote, and it's really worth listening to the method. In any of these research papers, they have the beginning abstract and then they have like the method that they followed.
I'll sit back and put on some music and let you tell us the method. Go on.
All right, cue it up. 87 University of Michigan students served as subjects for the experiment. All were over 21 years of age and were informed in advance only that the experiment would involve responses to an alcoholic beverage. Half of the subjects were required to avoid intake of any food or beverage after lunchtime on the day of the experiment, which took place in the early evening. The other group of subjects were given the same instructions, but they were to eat a full-size candy bar 1 hour before reporting to the laboratory and to bring the wrapper with them. Upon entering the laboratory, the subjects were assigned one of 5 treatment conditions based on self-reported body weight. The purpose of the assignment procedure was to control the effects of body weight and general intellectual ability by equating the treatment groups on those attributes as nearly as possible. The subjects were then asked to drink a cocktail presented by the experimenter. All such cocktails were served with cocktail napkins, in stemmed glasses, and were garnished with a cherry and a twist of lemon peel. A darkroom signal timer was set to allow exactly 10 minutes for the drink to take effect, and at the end of this period, subjects immediately began the language test described below. The cocktail ingested by each subject contained either 0, 1, 1.5, 2, or 3 ounces of 90 proof liquor. The 4 alcohol treatments consisted of varying amounts of a punch known for its deceptive potency. It is 1/2 liquor and 1/2 other ingredients such as citrus juices. A 3-ounce serving thus contained 1.5 ounces, and so on. The 0 liquor condition was designed to simulate a cocktail in order to hold constant the wide range of non-physiological influences that normally attend the act of drinking liquor. After 10 minutes had elapsed, the subjects were taken to a separate room and tested on 2 measures: the standard Thai procedure to approximate pronunciation in an unfamiliar language, and the digit symbol test, a subtest of the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. So there you go. Isn't that fascinating? I love the fact that the details that it was they had the liquor had the cherry garnished, the twist of lemon peel, and anyway.
I actually, it was cognac and rum, the liquor that was used, by the way.
That's right. And then later on, he repeated the same study with Valium. They were given either a placebo or Valium to sort of relax them in the same way, and then do the test.
So, you were talking about the standard Thai procedure. So basically they were having to, if those of you that don't know it, like I didn't until Lindsay told me about it, they were doing expansive drills, weren't they? It was
listen, repeat stuff and things like that. Yeah. Now, so probably people are wondering what happened. Of course, like so many other tests and things like that, the results were inconclusive. There was some evidence that that being a bit drunk would lower your inhibition and therefore your pronunciation would go up. But if you got far more drunk, then it would go back down again. So it was kind of like a graph, it would go up, which kind of would make sense. You've kind of got the different stages of inebriation. Your confidence goes up, and then your fluency and your pronunciation went up, and then it went down again.
I mean, if you think about it, we take away from language learning, but you would say that as people get more inebriated, they begin to slur anyway, don't they? So it's fairly obvious that pronunciation would get affected by alcohol at some point.
I think what was shown in one of the experiments was apparently that the person administering the test made more of a difference on the scores than the tranquilizer itself. So right. The person giving the test, because this was talked about in Jane Arnold's book on affect in language learning, a Cambridge book, which she uses that to explain, it's the effective way that the people were made to feel at ease or not by the scientist. And since then, I don't think I've ever heard of people repeating that experiment.
I did come across, I'm not repeating that experiment, but I did come across what do they call it, a meta study of lots of studies of language learning and alcohol last night, which I'll put on which suggests similar things for it. I also came across I think it was a website called Tipsy Pilgrim, where they were actually talking about there was an article on language learning makes you better able to speak a foreign language, and they coined the phrase what do they call it, the single shot method. And I was thinking of all those things. We've had behaviorism, we've got dogma, we've got that, but have we ever tried the single shot method, which I think is a kind of nice coinage of it for it. Slightly going away from language teaching, but still staying with alcohol with it. There is research to say that alcohol improves memory, which I find difficult to believe.
Oh, I find that weird to believe as well.
It's apparently because of the dopamine effect, the happy feelings you get of alcohol helps you remember things. And so there are a number of educational related studies that are whether people remember better if they've had a few shots of alcohol. So maybe it is a win-win for the students for it. I think with me, going back when you asked me just before the break, especially with Czech, which is a very hard language to get the cases right, I would always, without think about which am I getting this part of the language right in the construction. And once I've had a few drinks, it was just kind of like, yeah, can't care now, I'll just go for it. So not necessarily from a pronunciation point of view, but not worrying so much about whether I'm getting the right case ending for the situation I am in and what am I talking about. And it seems to work enough for me. So
well, shall we take another quick break and come back? Well,
I think it's possibly time to take a break. Well, not take a break, but you know what we haven't done? I haven't beaten you in a fight this season.
Oh, my God.
I think it's time to have your...
You want to fight? Season. All right.
Yeah, I'm 2-0 up, Lindsay. So, I want to hold on to that.
Let's fight.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to another round of TEFL Fights, in which our two competitors will duke it out to decide who's right and who's wrong. So, what are the Queensberry rules? Well, each fighter will have 1 minute to argue their case and do some serious damage to their competitor. In round 2, they'll have the chance to follow up and land the knockout blow, persuading the judge, that's me, producer James, that they've managed to win. So you might remember in our previous episode we discussed clothes. So in this bout, our brave pugilists will be sparring over this topic. Teachers should not teach words for undergarments. So going first and arguing for the topic, it's Lindsay. Seconds out, let's go.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say we chose this topic deliberately ridiculous, so I'm going to make an attempt anyway to argue the point, okay? I have 4 things to say about this. First, frequency. When teaching any vocabulary set, choosing any vocabulary set, you need to make choices about frequency. You can't teach everything, so we need to select the most frequent and useful words. In terms of a clothing set, that means trousers, sweater, jumper, jacket are all much more frequent than panties, boxers, bra, etc. I did a search on this. Underwear does not even make it to the top 5,000. So since we have limited time, we go with the most frequent. One reason why we shouldn't teach the undergarments. 2, there is a titillation factor to teaching bra, panties, boxers, etc. But this could lead to awkwardness. For the same reason we don't teach words that these kind of clothes cover, e.g. penis, vagina, cleavage, etc. These are also a key part of human existence, but we don't expect to have to teach them. Any teacher who has taught these words, if they have any sensitivity at all, will know that not everyone in the classroom is comfortable with it. From the last point, how are we supposed to practice the words? Any good vocabulary teaching cycle doesn't only present, but it practices. So there's less activity for relating to clothes that involve personalization. Isn't this too personal when it comes to...
And that's time up. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, now Shaun, it's over to you.
Okay, before I start, I'd just like to say that one of my favourite programmes on the radio is called The Unbelievable Truth. And in that, somebody has to speak for a short while and get in a number of items, a number of truths, and the panel has to work out the truths. So since we're taking this so seriously, my minute will include, my minute argument will include a number of key vocabulary items to the topic. Can you pick them out? Okay? So, my argument will be brief. I've girdled my loins, and I feel quite frankly that Lindsay, rather than basking in the glory of a good argument, is somewhat embarrassingly getting his knickers in a twist about something so small. Of course, it might upset people's sensibilities to teach these words, and they would rather see them as unmentionables in the classroom. But personally, I think it is a bit of a slip to deprive students of key words. There is already enough censorship going on within materials, and I can't see why we lock some language away in drawers. What is an English breakfast without bacon? And what is a clothes lesson without undergarments? Teachers have a vested interest in ensuring our students are language prepared. What happens on a business trip in the UK if a student suddenly gets caught shorts and finds himself having to go buy a new pair of underwear? Okay, it might not be appropriate to teach every new word to very young students who might be more interested in teddies than Y-fronts, but late or even early bloomers will surely ask teachers such words. So how do you avoid them? How does a teacher plan a lesson on clothes and just stop at shirts and trousers? Gee, such a lesson would leave us stringing students a thong. Being serious for a moment, underwear is a rich topic. The words are polysemous and easy to teach. They form part of the idiomatic makeup of a language, and they're fun. As our last podcast showed, it's handy if you know the difference between taking your pants off and taking your pants off. And let's face it, if we get to the topic of thongs, it can cause much an embarrassment. Not teaching these words would be simply pants.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. There's a unique take on the arguments. Okay, so now it's going to go back to Lindsay. Lindsay, you've got 30 seconds. Over to you.
Okay, first of all, I very much respect and I was in admiration of the bit of verbal acrobatics and linguistic acrobatics that my partner did. However, a lot of those idiomatic expressions were very British. I can understand teaching those expressions and words associated if you are in Britain. As a North American teaching abroad in another country, don't see the point at all. So not really in favor of it just for that reason. And also, like many things, I'm if students need it, they will find it. This is the same with swear words. This is the same with other taboo topics. I'm not saying that we censor them, but there's so many other things to teach that it is doing a disservice to spend more time on these kind of things that might make people feel uncomfortable, but they will find anyway. So some things are better when discovered by yourself, for yourself, and not forced on you in a class of 15 to 30 people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. And Shaun, back to you.
Yeah, no verbal gymnastics in this one. Just going back to the moment, the topic of frequency, which is where Lindsay started. That's all well and good, but as he well knows as a material writer, we don't keep everything within frequency if it's taught in a lexical set. There's often the old adage that comes up with trainers about the days of the week and how they feature in frequency. The argument being we wouldn't teach some because they're simply not that frequent. So I think the lexical set argument puts pay to that. Secondly, yes, people can discover things themselves. We could say that about any piece of language. So just because they can discover it from themselves doesn't really say we shouldn't have it in our lesson. I do take on board the embarrassment factor, and I think like any piece of language, we should be sensitive to our students' needs. But then to have a blanket ban and say not teach these because is a little bit far-fetched. Sounds a little bit like. Damn.
Okay.
Now I'm dying to know what it sounded a little bit like.
I know you'll never know. You'll never know. Okay, so we've heard some great arguments from both of our combatants, and it's time now for me to make my final decision as to who has the eye of the tiger and who's been left spread-eagled on the canvas. And while I have nothing but admiration for Shaun's marvellous puns, I'm a huge fan of the pun.
Oh my God.
And a pun run is something I always love to hear. But with such a difficult topic, I thought Lindsay did a marvellous job of convincing us that teachers should not teach words for undergarments. So I'm going to give it to Lindsay.
Oh, wow! Oh, my God!
It's
yes!
More fix in an American election.
Oh, yes! Oh, take that! Take that!
Well done, Lindsay. I congratulate you on finally winning one. If you were playing my game, by the way, Tortured and Untortured, there were over 13 different pieces of underwear in my book.
It was very good. Some of them were a bit
Tortured. I was getting as many in as possible.
You're right.
Yes.
Getting caught up smalls.
Yes.
I thought was quite interesting.
My favorite was G stringing a student at a thong. I thought that was
stringing a student on a thong. I salute my fallen opponent.
Fallen this time, but might have lost the battle, but still winning the war.
Oh, no. Here's where I go and kick sand in his face.
It's worth remembering, Lindsay, it is 2-1 to Shaun still, so there's still some work.
I know, but I could still give him a wedgie.
Okay, thank you guys, and thanks for everyone for listening. See you next time on TEFL Fights.
Okay, Shaun. So, coming towards the end of our episode, and you have on the show notes here that you wanted to do is you wanted to test me on my drinking vocabulary. Yeah, is this my British? Are you going to test me on British type words?
I don't know if they're British or not, because I think the drinking vocabulary is influenced by all the different nationalities on there. But we'll see. I said earlier on that there are. It's one of those things where there are many elements of vocabulary. I mean, you'll find websites, and it's kind of them almost like play one-upmanship. There's a website that says, 360 words for being drunk, and the BBC on their cultural page has English has 3,000 words for being drunk.
Oh gosh, it sounds like those things like the Eskimos have all these different words for snow.
Yeah. So it's very typical of that. But it reminded me that when it kind of, when you're doing those initial teacher training courses, and I'm like doing vocabulary 101, and I'm teaching convey meaning, and I introduce the idea of a Klein. So I thought, here we go. Let's give Lindsay a Klein. So, at one end of the cline, you are sober, and then at the other end of the cline, you're drunk. And what we would then do is in the session is, throw out these words, or ask them to, depending on how mixed the nationalities were, to throw out words and say which end of the line you would put it.
Okay, I've drawn my cline.
Okay, so I'm going to start with what which people might see as slightly an old-fashioned word, but it's one my mother, I remember for being a child. So my first word for you is squiffy. So if somebody says they're feeling a bit squiffy,
okay, I'm putting that on my cline. Do I tell you where, or do I say at the end?
Probably best for us to say now, unless you're actually writing them down on the cline.
I am writing them down on the cline.
Okay, so let's give you. We'll come back to them at the end. Then. Sozzled.
Sozzled. These are. I knew that these were going to be British words. Okay, sozzled.
Well, you could share some with me later on with it.
Squiffy and sozzled. I don't think I've ever heard in North American.
Oh, that's really no North American English, but you hang around with a lot of Brits.
Yeah,
so,
no, I've heard them elsewhere. Okay, keep going. Squiffy, sozzled. Yeah.
Bladdered.
Blathered.
Bladdered. B-L-A-T-T. Bladdered.
B-L-A-T-T.
No, bladdered. You can have battered if you want, but
like as bladdered, like as your bladder.
Yeah, correct. Hence the meaning of it.
Okay, bladdered. Okay.
Legless.
All right, got that. Yeah.
One more.
Yeah.
Off your trolley.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, I'm gonna.
I know James is listening, so James it'd be interesting to see if James agrees with us on this one. But go on, it's.
Well, I almost put them so I thought squiffy would be like not too drunk, right? So the squiffy was low on. I was sort of a third of the way up my cline.
Yeah, probably not even that far up, but yeah. I think.
And then I put sozzled, but bladdered. I don't know where I'd put that. But I put sozzled, and then I put bladdered, and then I put off the trolley, and then off your trolley, and then I put legless at the very top.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. Yeah, they were getting stronger as we went along with it. I mean, there are so many of them.
I was hoping you'd give me a few more sober ones, like stone cold.
Well, because I'm reading the drunk list. James has sent me a message saying he agrees with me, so that's quite good. But I was reading the drunk words. Okay, Mr. Sober, then what words have you got for sober?
Actually, it's interesting. There are hardly any. Whatever. Stone cold sober.
Clear-headed.
Clear-headed. Yeah, clear-headed. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you have other words for sober, we all know that there's probably, as they said, 3,300, whatever for drunk, but other words for sober, we'd be interested in hearing them. So you can share with us on our Facebook page or via Twitter or at our website. Do I say it now, the website?
You can say it now if you wish.
Our website, which is www.teflcommute.com.
I still like the way you say www. Like it's so...
Like,
it's so
what am I supposed to say? What?
No, just say TEFLcommute.com. For me, I know it's not the top of the new series. It's www, redundant language, But anyway, before we get too banjaxed, addled, badgered, battered, whatever else.
Well, yeah. So you speak for yourself. I'm stone cold sober.
Half cut's one of my favorites.
Half cut, yeah.
I'm half
cut, yeah. Tipsy, I guess, would be another one. Oh, we could just keep going on, but let's wrap up the season on a high note here, then. And
on a high note, surely that's a different type of substance.
Maybe time for another episode. Okay, guys, it's been great. Thank you for listening to us all this season. Please subscribe. Please leave us a rating if you can, where you listen to your podcasts. We've heard that this helps podcasts, so we definitely want in on that as well. And we'll be back again with a new season in a month or so, a couple of months. I'm not sure.
Well, presumably we'll be back in the autumn because people will be heading in Europe. Anyway, people will be heading to their summer break. And of course, if you are going on break, we now have well over 40 episodes of the TEFL Commute for you to catch up on. And we'll be back here, I would imagine, at the beginning of the new term, new semester.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Cheers, Lindsay.
Cheers, Shaun. Thank you.
To celebrate the end of this season of TEFL Commute, we have a special giveaway for our listeners from the Extreme Language Teaching website, a website devoted to interesting and different materials co-created by our host Lindsay Clanfield. Now, 100 TEFL Commute listeners can get a free copy of the latest teaching adventure, a series of role plays called The Island. To get your free copy, simply go to the website exelt.wordpress.com. That's exlt.wordpress.com. Find the link to the store page for The Island and enter the download code COMMUTE, all in lowercase letters, at checkout. That's exelt.wordpress.com. Find the store page for The Island, enter COMMUTE and check out. Remember, use all lowercase letters, and this offer is valid for the first 100 listeners only. Enjoy the island adventure. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Shaun Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.
We